G'day guys, and today, well, it was supposed to be my week off, but unfortunately the wheels of authoritarianism are ceaselessly turning, so I am forced to come out of my little holiday and talk about something quite terrible. So what we're going to talk about today is the breaking news that Australian authorities, namely ASIO, are investigating claims that a Chinese espionage ring tried to install an agent for Beijing in a seat in federal parliament. So sources with knowledge, we don't know these sources of course because it's the mainstream media, sources with knowledge of the alleged plot believe that the suspected Chinese intelligence group offered $1 million to pay for the political campaign of Liberal Party member and Melbourne luxury car dealer Nick Zhou, 32 years of age, to run for an eastern suburbs seat. The plot appears to be part of an operation to place a Chinese agent in parliament. Now Zig Zhou is a bit of an interesting character because what interests me is when you're trying to do this spying thing, when you're trying to put someone in a foreign government, how do you go about targeting someone like that? That's pretty interesting. Like, surely he's not the only person they thought of, but he's the person they chose. So why might that have been? Well, it seems that Mr. Zhou was a car dealer, as was mentioned, living above his means, trying to run businesses, spending too much money, and running into financial problems. We can see that in 2017 he was charged with obtaining financial advantage by deception. He was fraudulently obtaining loans to buy luxury vehicles, and in 2018 his car dealership business was collapsing and he had fallen out with his wife and stuff like that. So he was in a vulnerable state, and he was described as young and ambitious, and he wanted to make money very quickly. So what Mr. Zhou says is that he was approached in early 2019 by a man called Mr. Chen, whose company is also based in Melbourne, who offered to set him up with a new business with $1 million capital injection, but in return, Mr. Zhou said that Mr. Chen wanted him to run for a seat in Australia's Parliament in the electorate of Chisholm. Now, this sort of behaviour is strictly forbidden under the Australian Constitution, which states anyone under allegiance, obedience, adherence to foreign powers, or entitled to privileges or rights, or a citizen of foreign powers is incapable to be chosen or sit as a senator or representative member. So that's the Constitution, Part 4, Section 44. Now, obviously, if you're accepting money from people, well, that might be seen as allegiance to foreign powers, and that's the subject of investigation here, because if this is merely Mr. Chen acting as an individual, giving him money so that he runs for a political campaign, that would be one thing. But this is an entirely different thing, because it is suspected that Mr. Chen is a spy for the Communist Party back in China. So corporate records from Hong Kong and China reveal that Mr. Chen runs several companies involved in the military, public security and energy sectors, and his business partners include firms linked to the Chinese government. So one of Mr. Chen's Hong Kong firms is a joint venture partner in a Beijing security company, which is a subsidiary of the Norinco Group, a Chinese state-owned defense company selling armored police vehicles and buses. So obviously there's your link to the Chinese Communist Party there. Additionally, Mr. Chen has also been photographed wearing a Chinese military uniform, which he claims was just the attire of a friend. So he was just wearing it just to take some photos and show off. And he's also posed as a journalist with the global media whilst attending international political summits, which again, he just claims that he had gone to a summit with a friend, wandering around and meeting people. Obviously he needs that journalist accreditation, which is listed in the Chinese Press Group Limited. He's listed as journalist number 14, so he certainly has these accreditations, and obviously that's a way for him to get into these summits for purposes that he claims to be completely innocuous. So based on that information, it would appear that Mr. Chen is the prime suspect as being the facilitator of an attempt to infiltrate the Australian Parliament. So according to the allegations of Mr. Zhou, and bear in mind this hasn't been proven yet, so it is just an allegation, Mr. Chen approached him earlier this year. There's been some conflicting dates. I've seen 1 year ago, I've seen earlier this year, so let's just run with early 2019. Mr. Chen approached Mr. Zhou and made him this deal. I give you $1 million cash injection for your business, you run for me, or you run for this seat in the Australian House of Parliament. So after this alleged meeting, Mr. Zhou approached ASIO and disclosed what had occurred. identifying Mr. Chen by name. Now here's where the story takes a turn for the worst. So in March this year, 2019, Mr. Zhou was found dead in a Melbourne motel room. Local police, who prepared a brief for the coroner, have been unable to conclude how he died, and since then we haven't actually had a statement on how he died, which is confusing to me because, you know, presumably you find that body, say, on the Monday, it gets to the coroner within the week. You think within the 8 months between then and now, we'd have some sort of answer, but we still don't, which is interesting. But perhaps I don't know, I know nothing about identifying cause of death, so perhaps it is something that takes a long period of time, but then again, we look at other murder cases and they seem to be able to determine them very quickly. Now, based on the amount of information we know about Mr. Zhou, it is entirely possible, given what we know, that he was having problems with his businesses, problems with his family, losing money, gaining money, living a very high-stress lifestyle. There is the possibility that he did take his own life, or he has overdosed on drugs, or that sort of thing. But given the nature of the events pertaining up to his death, it does leave room to speculate and even accuse that he was eliminated by Chinese operatives. And there are multiple reasons this may occur. If he's not alive, he can't give testimony in a public court, and a closed-door meeting, a disclosure between ASIO agents and an individual is far easier to deny than public court record. We keep that cat in the bag and that sort of thing. Perhaps they don't want him to name any more names. Perhaps he saw other people. Perhaps he knew things, certain information. The breadth of the operation, who are the people who may have been targeted, this sort of thing, whether it's been going on in the past. And unfortunately now we'll be unable to know any of this information if he was told this information, because again, he's dead and he can no longer give testimony. So this story, this fucking story. If what is being alleged is true, and there really was a serious attempt by the Chinese Communist Party to install a member to the Australian Parliament, that's bold, man. That is fucking bold. I mean, we've had, shady donations. There's obviously online warfare going on, memetic warfare. There's hacking attempts. There's, disruption to the Hong Kong protests. But this is right out there. This is right in your face. This is something straight out of a fucking 60s spy drama or something. I mean, as I've said before with my video on the Chinese donation scandal, if you're doing this shit this openly, this boldly, you're fucking confident, man. They thought they were going to get away with this, and that's why they attempted this. I mean, this is espionage. You want to be careful. You really don't want to be caught. And if this is the type of operation they think they can get away with, well, that's pretty high up there. Infiltrating a member to the Australian Parliament. What else are they doing? That's the real takeaway that I have from this. If they're willing to go that far, what are they already doing? What else do they have the confidence to do? And the answer is basically everything, because, again, installing a member to the Australian Parliament, that's pretty up there in terms of espionage and infiltration and manipulation and the perversion of the democratic process. So it makes me seriously worried as to what else is going on. I mean, there's the insidious sort of soft takeover of Australia with the buy-up of land and resources and ports and that sort of thing, but this is quite something else fucking entirely. So ASIO says they knew what's going on. They say they're investigating it, but again, it's been 8 months and we still don't know how this dude died, and this is the first thing we're hearing about it. It's not fucking good. So yeah, please spread this story around. Everyone needs to know. It's not something that's being talked about a lot for the weightiness of the story. I mean, luckily for the Chinese Communist Party, there was a big storm recently in Sydney, so a lot of the news is focused on that, and the bushfires are obviously taking up a lot of the news cycle, but this is seriously a story that needs to be talked about. It is being alleged that the Chinese Communist Party attempted to infiltrate a compromised member into the Australian Parliament using a cash bribe. That's unfucking believable. The fucking balls you have to attempt that sort of thing. And again, if you're brave enough to do that, what else are you doing? Because, if you're brave enough to climb Mount Everest, you're not going to have much problem walking up a small hill. So, absolutely shocking. Thanks all for sticking around, and have a good one.